Hello and welcome to a new video with the Electric Trucker. This week I'm back on the road on behalf of the charging industry. I'm getting stopped by the police in Austria. The ETruck app is also finally online, and I tell you why the logistics industry needs to get to work right now and shouldn't wait for megawatt charging. I am currently at the Munich Trade Fair because the EVCO was exhibited at the Power to Drive event. But now, I have it back, and the week begins. This week I'm going to Trento in Italy. It's a fantastic trip in this weather, but I only have 25% in the battery, so I'll head to a truck charging park where I've never been before. My week isn't off to a bad start, because the sun is shining and the truck is charging, but you can guess what happened. These 400 kilowatt Alpitronics have the same problem I had before. They offer over 500 amps, and then the truck stops charging. In the last video I had the same problem with E.ON Denmark. The video was published on Sunday, and on Wednesday I got a call from them that they fixed it on Monday. So kudos to E.ON Denmark for solving it within a day. They have probably been in contact with E.ON Germany, but the information has not yet reached Upper Bavaria. However, there are also several 300 kilowatt chargers which work, but have uncooled cables, which is why the charging power has already dropped to 280 kilowatts. Now it's up the mountain towards the Brenner, and this time I'm transporting more fast charging stations for Alpitronic, but I'm not going to the headquarters, but to an external warehouse. A quick word about the charging park I was at earlier. As an e-trucker, you don't just want to have charging parks, but they also need attractive pricing, otherwise you only go there in an emergency. The cheapest provider at the charging park was Energy Southern Bavaria at 45 cents per kilowatt hour, with a €5 subscription, but only with a card, and only for customers in Upper Bavaria, so a very small customer base. I charge there with my cheapest card for 62 cents, which is too much to run the e-truck economically. For ENBW or ARL, you make the effort with the subscription because there are so many charging parks, but what do you do with these mini charging point operators if they are not bundled into a tariff? How do you make them attractive for truckers like me, who maybe only come by once a month? Making such charging parks economically accessible for all logistics companies is really tricky.
Denaro oder tessera Geld oder Karte einführen.
25 Euro.
Attendere prego hier. Wait.
So. The Italians are taking a siesta, so I'll leave the trailer here and drive to Ionity. I'm now here in Trento with a beautiful view. It's much nicer than waiting in the parking lot at the warehouse. And Italians don't drive electric cars, so I have the whole charging park for myself. And it's so much fun driving the EVCO around here because it's super agile in city traffic. I just wanted to get myself a coffee to go, but there's no such thing in Italy because life can't be so stressful that you don't even have a few minutes to enjoy a coffee. I'm now fully loaded with 22 fast charging stations. It's 4:45 because I had an online conference beforehand, but I have 81% in the battery, so I can now drive as long as I want. I have an amazing announcement. The ETruck app is finally online. If you search for ETruck in the iOS or Play Store, you can download it now. In the overview of the app, you can see all the truck charging parks in the area, and you immediately get the driving time displayed, and can always check with the tachograph if you can still get there. We've also added some information about whether I've already been on site to make it more credible. We have revised the filters at the top. One is for whether you can charge with a trailer attached. Then you can filter according to whether you can stay overnight. This means that the parking space can be reached from the charging station via private property so that the rest period does not have to be interrupted. And a filter according to the preferred operator. You can select which charging cards you have, but can also quickly switch the filter off in case you have no choice but need to charge wherever possible. We now also have the live data for neighboring countries because this is supposed to be a European app. We now have Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Poland, Czech Republic, Italy, and France. We've put a lot of effort into this, but of course we don't have all the charging parks. But if you zoom in, all DC charging parks are listed. And you can click on it and a form will open where you can tell us what it looks like on site and therefore help out other truckers. We reached the highest point and now it's all downhill. I still have 34% in the battery and the consumption was 2.2 kilowatt hours per kilometer. Most of the route here is limited to 40 kilometers per hour to protect the brakes of the trucks, but even then, the EVCO is recuperating at almost 200 kilowatts. That's a lot of energy that can be recovered, which means that the Brenner Pass is no challenge at all. E-trucks work so well in the mountains. I've just had the electric trucker nightmare because I was checked by the police in Austria. All the trucks were diverted to the service area and then they drove over a weighbridge. And then the sign goes left or right where you should drive, and when I drove over it switched to the right and they pulled me out. The entire truck weight was measured once and then each individual axle was measured again. The EVCO had 11.9 tons on the rear axle. You're only allowed to have 11.5 tons, but maybe it's just within the tolerance, and technically the EVCO has a 13-ton rear axle. They measured it again very precisely, but then sent me on my way. They didn't check anything else. I could have driven without a driver's license. I'm really happy that the axle load check went well. That was my biggest nightmare. I'm now in beautiful Austria, with lots of mountains. And here the first charger only had half the power, and the second only 300 kilowatts instead of 350. But I'll take it. I also had a cool conversation with two truckers, and they asked if I was a test driver for electric trucks. I thought to myself, if you drive an EVCO, then yes, you're basically a test driver. And it's really cool to see the technical progress over the years, because this is a dispenser solution with the charging technology in the housing behind it, and you need two of these housings to generate 350 kilowatts. And the Alpitronic 400 that I have in the trailer can handle 400 kilowatts and is smaller than just one of these housings. I just found out that I have the Dangerous Goods Class 1 training on Friday. I'm already allowed to drive dangerous goods from Class 2 upwards, but now I'm getting the additional training. It's a one-day course with the exam on the same day. Here's a fitting example of how important the ETruck app is, because Google Maps had really nice pictures with lots of space, but it was a wide-angle picture and in reality there's very little space. The way I'm standing here and charging on the left-hand side is the only way you could charge, otherwise you would block others. In these situations you have to talk to the gas station operator to see if they allow it and at which times, or whether they don't want any trucks here at all. Next problem, the cables have to be raised for the charging process to not get interrupted. This is often the case with cars where you have to lift the plug slightly to start the charging process. Fortunately, Krümelix helped me out, because I can only charge with his blanket. If I pull it out, the truck stops charging. But I'm getting full 300 kilowatts, and there is a solar roof here, and there's a lot of solar everywhere around, so today I'm the solar trucker. Last week I was at the Power to Drive trade fair for photovoltaic, battery storage and charging infrastructure. My truck was on display there, and I was also invited to a panel at the conference, and we discussed the future of megawatt charging. And MAN gave a long presentation about it, which also coincided with my experience. Namely that 80% of all transports can be completed with 400 to 500 kilowatt CCS, and that you only need higher charging capacities for the last 20%. And to make the discussion even more complicated, Phoenix Contact presented a CCS plug with 1000 kilowatt peak and 800 kilowatt continuous power. I thought that was the highlight, that a more powerful CCS could be the future, because it makes much more sense to just have one plug standard. It would simplify everything so much. Because I think the discussion about MCS misses the point. You would think that without MCS, electromobility in logistics would fail. If someone briefly joins the panel discussion and hears that MCS is not yet fully standardized, then they believe the technology is not ready yet and continues to drive diesel. But we are perfectly equipped in terms of trucks, the infrastructure and our power grid to make the first wave of electrification. We don't have to wait for MCS. It is really important for the industry to understand that the time of waiting is over, That is very important to me, and that is why I think the discussion around MCS is just smoke and mirrors and stops people from taking action. I parked my trailer and am now charging. Lots of spots are still free, but who knows what it will look like in 2 hours. I'd rather have peace of mind and reserve my space. But changing parking spaces after charging is still not clearly regulated by law, which will be incredibly important in the next years until we have truck charging parks everywhere. You could easily create exceptions if they are strictly defined. For example, that you can repark up to 2 hours after the start of the rest period, but there needs to be a minimum of 7 hours of sleep where the truck is not moved. I could come up with other criteria, such as reparking only on private property, only at walking speed, or without a trailer. The law is being worked on, but we need transitional regulations or tolerance regulations so that truck drivers are not prosecuted when they repark after charging. Good morning. I drove a bit faster today because the only charging park in the area is not ideal in terms of charging power, so I raced here. I've driven 382 kilometers in 4.5 hours. Please don't calculate what the average speed was. Now we have to talk about my new favorite topic, electric buses. I already mentioned this in one of the last videos, but I have only found one electric long-distance bus, and that is the Van Hool TDX 25E that was built in 2021. It is a double-decker bus with 676 kilowatt hours. Most of the production went to a large bus company in the US. There is also a very exciting video where someone transferred this bus from coast to coast in the US. I will link it in the description. Apart from that, I didn't find anything else on the subject, and Van Hool has also gone bankrupt in the meantime. But a few weeks ago, MAN announced an electric long-distance bus to be presented in October, the Lions eCoach 14E, and it has completely identical technology to the MAN ETGX, the same batteries, the same engine, the same gearbox. I was thinking about getting a bus driver's license, but I didn't know that I can already drive a bus with my truck driver's license. I think the trucks are made in Turkey, and someone has to deliver them to Western Europe. It would be amazing if I can get a chance to do that. It would be a real adventure, and I'm sure it would be interesting to watch. I'm in a really good mood because I'm at this Eon charging park again, and everything is fixed. It's really professional that they took care of it so quickly. Of course, it would be cool if this issue could be communicated to all truck charging station operators, but otherwise, if it works again after a week, it's not a big deal. Hello! Hello! Hallo. The most important thing is done. It's just before 9, and I'm unloaded. Now I have to hurry to get to Lear by the end of the day. But I wanted to show you something here. This truck has a semi-trailer at the back, and then a dolly axle on which the trailer turns. But if you don't have a trailer on it, you can drive these two axles to the front, and then you have a short motor vehicle. That's some clever engineering and super flexible for the company. And why do I charge here? Not because I have to charge, but because the electricity is so incredibly cheap. I've charged for too long and now have to drive out of here in reverse. But I had a motivating conversation with Bernd. He doesn't drive this Volvo FH electric on regular routes, but on unscheduled long-distance routes. He also knows a lot of charging parks, and we could both relate to each other's experiences. I haven't been back in Leer at our depot for a long time, but I would say the road trip was successful. I've driven 2,400 kilometers with a consumption of 1.05 kilowatt hours, so absolutely fine for the fact that it was a heavy load and also went over the mountains. And here is our new DAF XD electric. I'll be testing it over the next few weeks. Greetings from beautiful Emden. I had my dangerous goods training for explosive substances today. The ADR stipulates that only diesel trucks can carry explosive substances, but there is a small niche for electric trucks: fireworks. An electric truck is allowed to transport up to 3 tons of fireworks, and we always transport a lot of fireworks at the end of the year. And I passed the test, which I celebrated by cutting off my hair, and now I'm starting my weekend. Next week, I'm going to Italy with our new DAF XD electric, and if you want to see the video earlier, you can get early access with a YouTube membership. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Ciao.